The wedding photographer kept looking around the room like she was missing something. 23 people in a venue meant for 80. Half the tables empty, the dance floor echoing every footstep, the catering staff quietly removing untouched platters. Should we wait for more guests? She asked, adjusting her camera strap. I shook my head. This was it. This was everyone who could make it to my wedding. Everyone who thought I was worth the 3-hour drive. Everyone who couldn't find an excuse good enough to stay home. But 3 years later, they rented not one but 3 vans, 12 seats each, for my sister Daisy's wedding, 5 hours away, not 3. Suddenly, distance wasn't too far. Grandma could travel, Dad could take time off, and Mom, her car was just fine. The same people who were too busy for my Saturday afternoon ceremony were now coordinating vacation days, splitting gas money, and packing coolers for an entire weekend celebration. My name is Beatrice. I'm 29, and I finally understood what love looks like when it's convenient, if you believe silence can speak louder than words. Subscribe to Revenge with Susie. It helps me reach more people and keeps me going to bring you more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, would you have done anything differently? I still remember counting the empty chairs, row after row of vacant seats, each one representing a person who found something better to do than watch me marry David. The excuses had started trickling in weeks before the wedding, each one delivered with just enough regret to sound sincere. 300 kilometers is just so far, honey, Mom had said over the phone, her voice carrying that apologetic tone that somehow never felt like an apology. You know how Grandma gets carsick on long trips, and Dad's back has been acting up. When I was 12, we drove 6 hours to see Daisy in her high school play. Grandma came along, packed Dramamine, and talked the entire way about how proud she was. Dad's back was fine then. Uncle Carl cited gas prices, this from a man who drove to Atlantic City every other weekend to gamble. Aunt Linda mentioned her work schedule, though she'd taken a week off the month before for a cruise. Cousin Sarah had her daughter's soccer tournament, which was apparently more important than my once-in-a-lifetime day. Each excuse felt reasonable standing alone. Together, they painted a picture I'd been too naive to see clearly. The night before my wedding, I called Daisy. I know it's a long drive tomorrow, but maybe you could. I'm so sorry. You know how crazy my schedule is with the new job, but send me pictures. I can't wait to see you in your dress. She couldn't wait to see pictures. She just couldn't be bothered to see me in person. The next day, David and I exchanged vows in front of 23 people. The photographer did her best, angling shots to hide the empty sections, but I could feel the absence in every frame. During the reception, the DJ kept asking if more guests were coming. The caterers kept glancing at their watches, but last month, everything changed. I was folding laundry when I heard Mom on the phone with Aunt Linda, her voice bright with excitement. We absolutely have to rent a van, a big one that fits everyone. This is Daisy's big day. We need to be there as a family. I stood in the hallway, a towel half folded in my hands, listening to her coordinate carpools, split rental costs, and plan cooler assignments. The same woman who couldn't manage a 3-hour drive for my wedding was now organizing a 5-hour convoy for my sisters. Distance isn't an issue when it really matters, she said into the receiver. When it really matters. I set the towel down carefully, those words echoing in my head like a bell I couldn't unring. That night, I lay awake thinking about all those empty chairs, about how easily they'd all be filled if the person getting married had been worth the effort. The difference became crystal clear when I learned who Daisy was marrying. Richard Hawthorne, a name that made people straighten their spines and adjust their voices when they said it. Did you hear the news? Mom burst through my front door without knocking, something she'd never done before. Daisy's engaged to the Hawthorne boy, the one who owns Hawthorne Development. He's running for city council. She said his name like she was announcing royalty. Richard Hawthorne III. She'd been practicing the pronunciation. I could tell. His family has been in real estate for generations, Dad added when I stopped by their house later. He was reading a newspaper article about Richard's business ventures, something he'd never done about David's teaching career. Smart money, political connections. This could really elevate our family's standing in the community. Elevate. As if we'd been in the basement before. I watched Mom transform over the following weeks. She bought etiquette books. She signed up for a wine tasting class. She even started watching YouTube videos about proper dinner conversation topics. None of this had happened for my wedding. Then again, David taught middle school math and coached Little League. He couldn't elevate anyone standing anywhere. The grocery store. Mrs. Henderson cornered me by the produce section. Your family must be over the moon about Daisy's engagement. Finally, someone's really making something of themselves. Finally. The word hit like a slap. What do you mean, finally? I asked. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened as she realized what she'd said. Oh, I just meant, well, you know, teaching is noble work, but it's not exactly prominent. Not prominent. Unlike my marriage, which had been quiet, simple, and apparently forgettable, that evening, I found Mom on the phone with someone from the country club, asking about venue tours. We want to make sure we understand the proper protocols, she was saying. This is our first time attending an event of this caliber. Our first time. As if every other family celebration, including my wedding, had been practice for this moment. I remembered my own venue search. The small banquet hall with the reasonable prices and the kind staff who didn't make me feel like I needed to prove I belonged there. It had been perfect for what I could afford and what I wanted, but it hadn't been impressive, and impressive, I was beginning to understand, was what made the difference between being forgotten and being celebrated. The cruel irony was becoming clear. My family didn't love Daisy more than me. They loved what she could do for them. The morning of Daisy's wedding, I called Mom to coordinate meeting times. What time should we plan to leave? Leave? Oh, honey. We're all traveling together in the van. There's not really room for another car in the convoy. What convoy? Well, we rented the 12-passenger van, and then Uncle Carl is driving his SUV, and the Hendersons are following in their sedan. It's going to be like a little parade. The Hendersons, neighbors who weren't even related to us. They'd been invited to join the family convoy to my sister's wedding. David and I would be making the 5-hour drive alone. Why didn't anyone mention we could coordinate with you? Oh, well, we just assumed you'd want your own space. You know how Emma gets on long trips. Emma, who had slept peacefully through countless family road trips. Emma, who was currently the perfect travel age of 8 years old. Emma, who was apparently now being used as an excuse to exclude us from family activities. When we arrived at the Pinehurst Country Club, I understood why the venue coordination had been so important to Mom. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Waiters in white gloves carried silver trays. Everything my wedding venue hadn't been, and everything my parents had apparently wished it had been. Beatrice Miller party. I told the hostess at the reception desk. She scanned her tablet twice, then looked up with a tight smile. Oh yes, here you are. Table 14. Table 14 was positioned behind a marble column in the far corner of the ballroom. From our seats, I could see about half of the head table where Daisy and Richard sat like royalty, surrounded by both sets of parents and the wedding party. Emma looked around with the brutal honesty only children possess. Mom, did we do something wrong? It feels like we're in timeout. Before I could answer, the woman at the neighboring table leaned over to her husband. Must be the economy seating, she said with a laugh. At least they got them out of the way. David's jaw tightened. We should say something. To who? I asked. The hostess who was following the seating chart. Daisy, who's busy being a bride. Mom, who's sitting at the head table with the important people. As if summoned by my words, Mom appeared at our table, radiant in her new dress and professionally styled hair. Isn't this incredible? Look at this place. Daisy really knows how to do things right. Mom, why are we sitting back here? Oh, honey. The seating was so complicated. Richard's family has so many business associates and political connections. They needed to be strategic about the arrangements. She glanced around as if someone might overhear. You understand, right? It's not personal. But it was personal. It was entirely personal. We were family, and we'd been placed where we couldn't interfere with the important conversations happening at the important tables with the important people. Of course, I said quietly. We understand perfectly. Mom beamed and hurried back to the head table, where Richard's father was telling a story that had everyone laughing, including my parents, who were hanging on every word like it was gospel. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, are we not important? The question nearly broke me, because the answer was sitting right there in front of us, spelled out in table assignments and seating charts, and family members who'd rather impress strangers than include their own blood were important to each other. I told her, and sometimes that has to be enough. During the cocktail hour, I excused myself to use the restroom and found myself walking past clusters of conversations I wasn't part of. Mom was discussing summer house rentals with Richard's mother. Dad was nodding enthusiastically as Richard's father explained investment opportunities. Uncle Carl was laughing too loudly at jokes I couldn't hear. Everyone looked like they belonged in this world of crystal glasses and networking opportunities. Everyone except the family members relegated to table 14. In the ladies' lounge, I overheard two women from Richard's side discussing the guest list. Lovely ceremony, one said, reapplying lipstick in the ornate mirror. The other agreed. Though I have to say, some of the bride's family seems a bit, well, you know. Oh, the ones in the corner? Yes, I noticed. Rather out of place, aren't they? The little girl kept staring. Daisy mentioned she has a sister who's simpler, married a teacher or something equally quaint. Sweet, I'm sure, but not really equipped for this level of society. Simpler, quaint, not equipped. I stayed in the stall until they left, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I'd heard. This wasn't just exclusion, it was active dismissal. Daisy had described me to these people as someone who couldn't handle their sophisticated world. When I returned to table 14, David took one look at my face and reached for my hand. What happened? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Emma was entertaining herself by folding napkins into different shapes, a skill David had taught her during the endless wait for food service. The tables near the front had been served their appetizers 20 minutes ago. We were still waiting. Finally, Mom appeared again, this time with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beatrice, honey, I need to ask you something. What? Well, Richard's family is very particular about maintaining a certain image. Could you maybe keep Emma a little quieter? She's been asking a lot of questions, and it's drawing attention. Emma, who had been whispering to her napkin animals and bothering absolutely no one. What kind of attention? You know how children can be. Sometimes they say things that... She glanced around nervously. Look, it's just for tonight. Can you help me out here? She was asking me to silence my 8-year-old daughter so that the important people wouldn't be reminded that regular families with regular children existed in their perfect world. She's not bothering anyone, Mom. Please, Beatrice, don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. As if asking to exist normally at my own sister's wedding was somehow unreasonable. Fine, I said. Emma, sweetheart, let's practice our quiet voices. Emma looked confused but nodded. She'd been perfectly quiet already, but now she understood that even her whispers were too much for this place. Mom squeezed my shoulder gratefully and hurried back to the head table, where someone was proposing a toast to the kind of family values that build strong communities. I wondered which family values they meant. The ones that put blood relatives in corners? The ones that asked children to disappear? Or the ones that prioritize social climbing over basic human decency? David leaned close to my ear. This is insane. We should leave. We can't leave, I whispered back. That would make it worse. But sitting there, watching my family perform for an audience that would never accept us anyway, I realized something had already broken that couldn't be fixed. Not with apologies, not with understanding, not with quiet voices and corner tables. Some damage is permanent, and some silences say everything. The formal photography session began during the golden hour, when the light streaming through the country club's floor-to-ceiling windows was perfect for capturing memories. I watched the photographer gather people near the main staircase, directing them with the authority of someone accustomed to expensive weddings. Immediate family first, she called out, adjusting her professional equipment. I stood up from table 14, smoothing my dress and reaching for Emma's hand. But Mom caught my eye from across the room and made a subtle gesture. Not yet. Wait. I sat back down, heat rising in my cheeks as I watched the immediate family arrange themselves around Daisy and Richard. Parents, grandparents, the maid of honor, the best man, all the people who mattered most. Now let's get the extended family in there, the photographer announced. This time I stood with more confidence, but Aunt Linda appeared at my elbow before I could take 3 steps. Oh, Beatrice, honey, they're doing the formal portraits now. Very structured, you know? The photographer has a specific vision. She glanced nervously toward the photo session. We'll get some lovely candid shots later, I promise. Candid shots. Not formal family portraits that would hang in frames and mark this day forever. Just casual afterthoughts for the relatives who didn't quite fit the vision. I watched from table 14 as they took shot after shot. Different combinations, different arrangements, but always the same core group. The people who enhanced the family's image rather than complicating it. Emma climbed onto my lap and whispered, "Why aren't we in the pictures, Mommy?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I looked at my daughter, bright, beautiful, completely innocent of the social calculations that had excluded us from this moment. Sometimes photographers have to work with smaller groups first. I lied, but we're family too. Yes, baby, we are. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was still true. We shared DNA, shared history, shared memories. But in the moments that mattered, the ones that got preserved in silver frames and photo albums, we were absent. David returned from the bar with drinks we didn't really want. This is unbelievable. They're not even pretending to include us. Lower your voice, I said, automatically. Why? So we don't embarrass them further by existing? He was right. But his anger felt dangerous here. This wasn't the place for confrontation or dignity or standing up for ourselves. This was a place where we were supposed to be grateful for corner tables and excluded from family photos and happy about it. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of Emma making faces with her napkin animals. At least someone would document that we'd been here, even if we didn't exist in the official version of this day. Later, someone's iPhone caught a candid shot of me watching the formal photos from across the room. In that image, you can see everything: the distance, the longing, the moment I stopped trying to belong and started understanding that I never had. It was the most honest photograph taken all evening. By 10 o'clock, Emma was fighting sleep in her chair. The tables near the front were alive with laughter and clinking glasses, but our corner felt like a separate event entirely. We'd been served our dinner nearly 30 minutes after everyone else, and the staff kept forgetting to refill our water glasses. David was drawing pictures on cocktail napkins to keep Emma entertained when the DJ announced that the bride and groom would be making their rounds to thank guests at each table. I watched Daisy and Richard move through the room like royalty, spending long minutes at the prominent tables, posing for selfies, accepting congratulations and business cards. When they reached table 13, just one over from us, they lingered for nearly 10 minutes while Richard's college roommate told elaborate stories that had everyone laughing. Then they were at our table. Daisy swept in for a quick hug. That smelled like expensive perfume and champagne. Thank you so much for being here. It means everything. Of course, I said. You look beautiful. And this must be Emma. Daisy crouched down to Emma's level, but her smile was the practiced kind reserved for children at formal events. Are you having fun, sweetie? Emma, exhausted and overwhelmed, just nodded. Well, we're so glad you could make it. Daisy was already straightening up, her attention shifting to the next table. The drive wasn't too terrible, was it? 5 hours, but we managed. Oh good. Richard and I are just making quick stops at each table, so many people to see. She squeezed my shoulder. We'll catch up properly soon, okay? And they were gone, moving to table 15 where Richard's business partners were waiting with congratulations and probably more networking opportunities. Emma looked up at me with tired eyes. Is that it? What do you mean, baby? Are we done now? Can we go back to our hotel? Out of the mouths of babes. My 8-year-old had just articulated what I'd been feeling all evening. We'd completed our obligation by showing up. We'd been acknowledged. We could leave. But as I started gathering our things, something inside me shifted. I looked around at the remaining festivities, the dancing, the toasts, the connections being made, and realized I didn't want to be here anymore. Not because I was angry or hurt, though I was both, but because I finally understood that I didn't need to be. You know what, Emma? Yes, we can go. David looked surprised. Are you sure? The night's still early. For them, maybe. But we've seen what we came to see. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Richard's father beginning another toast about family and tradition and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who share your values. I didn't turn around to see if anyone noticed we were leaving, because for the first time all evening, I didn't care. In the parking lot, Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom, do they love us? David stopped walking and looked at me, waiting to see how I'd handle it. I knelt down to Emma's level, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes people get confused. about what love looks like, sweetheart. They think it's about big parties and fancy places. But real love is quieter than that. It's about showing up when it matters and choosing to be kind even when nobody's watching, like Daddy reading to me every night. 3 months later, the call came on Tuesday morning while I was making Emma's school lunch. Richard's been arrested. Mom's voice was tight with panic, stripped of the social polish she'd been cultivating since the engagement. Arrested for what? Embezzlement. Campaign finance violations. It's all over the local news. Her voice cracked. Beatrice, we need to talk. Can you come over? I looked at the news alert that had just popped up on my phone. Local developer Richard Hawthorne III charged in corruption scandal. The photo showed him being led away in handcuffs, his perfect wedding smile replaced by the grim expression of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. I'll call you back, I said. No, wait, this is urgent. The reporters are calling everyone who was at the wedding. Someone gave them the guest list, and your name wasn't mentioned in any of the newspaper coverage. Thank God. You weren't in the formal photos, so they don't know you were there. You could help us control the narrative. The request hung in the air between us like a bridge I could choose to cross or burn. Control it how? Just, if anyone asks, you can, honestly, say you barely knew Richard. You only met him that one time, at the wedding, and you didn't really interact with him. She was right. I could honestly say that, because they'd made sure I barely interacted with anyone important that night. What about the rest of the family? Well, your father's in some of the photos with Richard's business associates. And I'm visible in several shots at the head table. Uncle Carl gave that toast about successful partnerships. We're all connected to this now. Connected. The word tasted bitter. When Richard was successful, I wasn't connected enough to sit at the important tables or appear in family photos. Now that he was toxic, I was perfectly positioned to help with damage control. Beatrice, are you there? I'm here. So you'll help us? If anyone asks, you'll explain that you weren't really involved in the family's relationship with Richard? I thought about Emma's question from the wedding night. Do they love us? I thought about the corner table, the excluded photos, the suggestion that my daughter's whispers were somehow disruptive to important people. Mom, let me ask you something. When you were planning the seating chart for Daisy's wedding, did you, specifically, request that we be placed away from the main area? Silence. Did Daisy ask you to keep us separate from Richard's family? Beatrice, this isn't the time for it's exactly the time. Because now you need the family member who wasn't important enough for the formal photos but also wasn't close enough to be implicated in a scandal. You need the sister who was too simple for Richard's social circle but smart enough to save everyone else. Who told you that? About being simple? Does it matter? The point is, you cultivated distance when it was convenient. Now you want connection when it's necessary. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, probably calculating how much she could apologize without admitting to much. What do you want me to say, Beatrice? That we made mistakes? That the seating arrangements weren't ideal? Fine. But this is bigger than family drama. This is about protecting everyone. Including me? Of course, including you. When have you ever protected me? The question settled between us like a stone dropping into still water. I'm not going to help, I said finally. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm not going to help you either. If reporters call, I'll tell them exactly what you said. I barely knew Richard. I didn't interact with him. I wasn't part of the inner circle. All true. That's all we're asking, but I'm also not going to coordinate with you, or manage the story, or make statements about family unity. You wanted distance? You have it. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Beatrice, please. We're family. Yes, I said quietly. We are. And that's exactly why this hurts so much. I hung up the phone and finished making Emma's lunch, my hands steady for the first time in months. That evening, David found me reading in the living room. How do you feel about all this? I considered the question seriously. Quiet, I said. Finally, I feel quiet. Is that good or bad? It's honest. The local news ran the story for a week. Richard's political career was over. His business was under investigation, and several prominent families in town were scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. My family managed to avoid most of the scrutiny, partly because I'd been truthful when reporters called. I genuinely hadn't been part of Richard's inner circle, but I also didn't go out of my way to protect them. I didn't coordinate statements or manage narratives or worry about their reputations. I simply stayed quiet and let them handle their own consequences. The silence I'd learned at table 14 turned out to be the most valuable lesson of all. Not because it hurt them, though it probably did, but because it finally freed me. I stayed quiet. They noticed eventually. If this reminded you of someone, maybe yourself, remember, we don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply stop being available when it's convenient for others. Subscribe if you understand the power of strategic silence. Exactly like that. As we drove back to our hotel, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just my relationship with my family, but my understanding of what I needed from them. The answer, I discovered, was remarkably simple: nothing. I needed nothing from them anymore, and that realization was surprisingly liberating.